And then they played fucking Time in a Bottle for the credits.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me?
That was a low blow to end this episode.
Like, kick us while we're down.
Holy shit.
This is so embarrassing to be crying this much, except it isn't because I cry all the time.
Hi, I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this is Welcome to the Writer's
Room,
Room, the show where we analyze media in various forms and tell you why it works or why it doesn't.
Today we're talking about Agatha All Along, episode 7, titled Death's Hand in Mine.
Spoiler warning going forward, this show is based in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so spoilers for anything that could possibly be under that umbrella. Marvel movies, TV shows, spin-offs, WandaVision specifically, you've been warned.
Okay, let's do a summary.
All right, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, I gotta think of a Latin word. I forgot. Three. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Kyrie eleison.
In this episode of Agatha All Along, we jump from vision to vision that Lilia has had throughout the series and start to understand what they mean. Jen and Lilia are finding their way through the tunnels underneath the road, while Agatha and Teen have started the next trial. Rio is still missing, and the Salem Seven are still on the move. All of this is told through the perspective of Lilia and is completely out of chronological order. Lilia is not only trying to put together her own path, but figure out what it all means for her. Eventually, she makes it to the trial and realizes she must do a reading for herself. She does so, piecing together all the tarot cards she has said throughout the season. The trial has ended and the group leaves just as the Salem Seven arrives. Lilia unreverses the tower card and gravity itself is reversed. The Salem Seven all fly into the daggers on the ceiling and die. Lilia then lets go and begins falling as well. As we cut to her younger self sitting down for her first lesson on tea leaves, the episode ends with her teacher saying, "Let's begin."
49 seconds. I'm affected.
This is one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen.
This is hands down my favorite episode of the show so far, and I probably one of the best episodes of anything I've watched.
It was phenomenal.
It was absolutely phenomenal from a storytelling point, from a technical execution point. If anyone says they don't like this episode, but they like anything by Christopher Nolan, I know they just hate women at this point.
I was thinking about this and started getting mad that people keep saying this show is like whatever, and people are kind of saying the show is not very good, because I'm like, name something better then. Do it, because you can't really. This show is top notch.
And we've talked about it. It's not for everybody. It's campy, it's kitschy. I feel like it's been on a very elevated level since day one. But if there was any doubt in anyone's mind that this show wasn't very well done and very, very good at what it was doing, this episode is the nail in the coffin.
Right. And it's crazy. It's so cool that they chose, this is the 7th episode out of 9.
Yeah.
And the first 2 came out together and the last 2 are coming out together. Mm-hmm. So we're at the home stretch, right? We've got one more week of this. Yeah. And for them to choose to focus on Lilia in an episode, I think that's so smart, because it gives them so much time for Agatha's whole turn of events, whatever's going to happen for her. And it's a good change of pace. And it's also just genius, because it's so heart-wrenching, because it's someone else's story that's been a side character throughout the whole thing. And now we see where she's been the entire series.
Yeah, I think whenever you write something like this, so the main cool vehicle we're using is the time travel, how she's flowing in and out of time. And I think not only do they use that in one of the most clear-cut ways I've ever seen in television use time travel, I think they used it perfectly as a device to set up how we are walking into this ending of the show. Yeah. And I'll talk about it more later. But I think we should just get right into it.
Yeah.
Because I could talk about this for hours, I feel like.
It's so good. And it's emotional too. It's not even just good. So
we just finished and I'm literally holding back tears.
I was
right
sobbing.
I'm so affected.
It's crazy because everything is fully told out of perspective or out of chronological order and through only Lilia's perspective. Basically, we get some shots of Teen and Agatha on their own in the trial, but it's literally at 2. Right? 2 or 3. Yeah. And then everything else is told through her perspective. So it starts with Lilia falling as Glinda, right? So she's in this costume as Glinda. That's just how it opens, is we see her and she's falling. I think this is really cool because we're starting where her story ends.
Yes, I have Yeah, I wrote that down at the end as well.
And that's the whole point of the theme of this episode, right? So we have the theme of the show, and then we have the theme of this episode is, right, like time is an illusion. That's what Lilia says, and we're telling the story fully out of time. So we start the story at the end, right? Lilia's story, when she lets go at the end, she's falling, and then this is her falling.
Yeah.
Genius. Already genius to start it out like that. That's so freaking smart.
Yeah, it's very good.
And it's really quick too. You don't even really notice it, but it also tells you immediately that this is going to be a story about Lilia, right? We open on her. She's important. This is her tale. So then Teen and Agatha are walking along the road, and she is pretty chatty and he's pretty mad. And she's like, go ahead, ask your questions. You're not really going to be able to read my mind. And he says, where is Rio? She says, not that question. Which I guess we'll talk to Rio when we get to Rio.
Yeah.
Or talk about Rio when we get there.
And again, I feel like this was definitely put in just to sort of set the stage. If we were just following Lilia's perspective, I could definitely see the audience being confused when we just like stumble into the trial. Right. But even in that little moment, they're very true to the characters. Agatha is being very Agatha.
Yeah.
We're meeting this now fully realized Billy character. And it's fun because they still have this connection with each other. They still have a back and forth, even though at least Billy is very upset. By the end of the episode, they are still like cracking jokes with each other, which is very cool and very subtle.
It is.
But yeah, I think it was a really good example of a scene specifically there to provide context, but also gave us a good few seconds of character. And
something else about this scene and the whole episode is they did such a good job of adding in humor to add to the story. So when Agatha and Teen are like butting heads and are mad at each other, they're really funny and they're getting in like zingers at each other.
Yeah.
And
I wrote down if you wanted straight answers, ask a straight lady or whatever she says.
Funny. It's so goofy. Like, it's just really funny. And they bring up Wanda and he says, she's not my mom. I have a mom. Which, like, yeah, he doesn't remember her. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And he says, is she really dead? And Agatha says, yes, no, maybe. And I feel like she is really dead. But I feel like they're leaving that in just to add suspense. Don't you agree?
Yeah, well, and it's one of these things like when you're at the level of power where you're like traveling through universes, and especially after this episode where all of time isn't real anyway, like who's to say anything is anything?
That's true. Yeah.
You know, like if Kevin Feige told me that the essence of the Scarlet Witch lived on, I'd be like, yeah, definitely.
Sure. Yeah. Anything to have her back.
So I do think it is played for laughs, but at the same time, the audience is just sort of like, yeah, okay, great.
Right. And basically, yeah, he's kind of mad and he questions if she's ever actually walked the road herself, which I'm leaning towards in the camp that she has now.
Okay. I think I am too.
I don't know why, but I am. I think it's just because in every trial, she has been the one. Well, I guess not every trial, but 2 of the 3. And then even in this one, this one just wasn't her one.
Yeah. Right? No, I think she's walked it before. I think she's just like, she doesn't want to talk about like a thing that happened. And that's going to be the big reveal. And I think it might have something to do with her son. Like maybe that was part of the road. Like she sacrificed her son on the road maybe.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But it's giving the vibe that she has done it.
Because I also think if she talks about it more, it's going to give away that like Rio probably killed everyone. Do you see what I'm saying? Or like she killed everyone and Rio took everyone kind of thing. See what I'm saying? So she just pushes it off. And I think in the beginning episodes where she's kind of like acting shady and acting like she doesn't know what's going on is because she is just feels so weak without her powers, right? Like last time she had powers when she walked the road and she doesn't this time.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. And I also think she never intended to walk the road. So she's very thrown off at the beginning. So I think that's like why she gave the feeling that she hadn't walked it. But she basically says we're alive and considers that success, which is funny. But she looks hurt by Teen kind of not trusting her anymore. And they see this old enchanted type castle, like straight out of a fairy tale. And that's their next trial. And they enter. And she's the Wicked Witch. And she goes, she's based on me, which I thought was really funny.
Very funny. Another, I like that the odes to Wizard of Oz are getting more obvious, which is very funny. Because even at the beginning, it was very clear, oh, Lilia's dressed as Glinda. That's crazy. Right. And then just the Wicked Witch is there. I thought that was funny. I thought Billy/Teen being just Maleficent was really funny.
Yeah.
Because it's you don't really think of Marvel being Disney until they can pull something off like that.
Wait,
that's just
so
really
true.
Cute to me.
That's really true. And he's happy with it.
Yeah.
He's if the cheekbones fit, he likes it.
So that was very cute. Again, it's the costumes are very in your face this episode, but the room where they're in with the tarot deck looks
really cool.
Absolutely gorgeous. And they had the entire time they had this natural light coming in through the window, so things were cast in this golden ray, and I'm just the set crew is working way too hard every single episode.
And I thought it was funny because even their costumes and makeup were very what's the way to put this, very basically pretty. I wanted to say yassified, but I didn't want to say that. But you know what I mean, her being Wicked Witch of the West, she's got highlighter and glitter on.
And she started doing it. She sat down and she's twisting her arms a weird way. And I'm you need to chill out. And
Teen has lipstick on and they really went for it with these and made them look pretty costumes. And I just thought that was fun. And it just adds to the campy aspect to it.
Yeah.
And so he's okay, well, I'll do a reading for you. And we see that the table says your path winds out of time, which is fun because that's kind of the entire point of the episode.
Which, looking back on it, clearly is about Lilia.
Right, exactly. And he starts the timer.
Yeah, which I also think, seeing Lilia first, I think it's very apparent that everybody knew this was about Lilia. So when they go to the tarot thing, it's oh, it's Lilia's trial. So I think they did a really good job they sort of revealed things without making it a big deal, which sort of put your guard down. So they had other reveals later, which I thought was really cool.
What do you mean? Give me an example.
It's so we just had this episode. Was it the episode before that was Billy's whole backstory?
Yeah.
So we just had that, and that's sort of the big reveal. Mm-hmm. So that to me is already a guard down thing. And then we have this Lilia episode, which is already something different.
Right.
But then you I remember going through the episode and feeling okay, yeah, then this happens. And I remember thinking things this is skipping around a bit, but it's got it's got to be herself that she reads at the end or things like that, which I think were supposed to be expected. But then the other stuff hits you, when they link all of the tarot cards together and when they link her traveling through the times,
it's crazy.
They purposely put you in a resting spot just so you can go, oh shit, again.
They make you feel you've predicted it. You know what's going to happen. And okay, well, she's going to do a reading for herself. Obviously Lilia needs to be here for this. So when there are you don't think you need to predict anymore because you're I figured it out.
Which I'm about to say something which I would, before this episode, I would say would be stretching it. But feeling how smart this team is, I feel the way they paced the specific order of the scenes and revealing things in this episode was to put you in the headspace of how Lilia feels all the time.
Right.
Because you can't expect everything because you see the future, but you're completely out of control at the same time.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. That's what's so good. And what I feel is top-notch storytelling is when you can look at the theme and you can, in every aspect of the episode, can tell the theme. And then when you look at the character and you say, how does this character feel? And then you make the audience feel like that character. To me, those two things combined is what makes 10 out of 10 top-notch storytelling. And they did that to a 10.
Well, and to juggle that on top of a non-convoluted time travel plot.
Right.
In 36 minutes.
That was crazy.
Absolutely phenomenal. This, is it Emmys for TV? This episode should win an Emmy, I feel, for writing.
And Patti LuPone herself.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was amazing.
It was very, very good.
So basically they're in the trial and they're kind of fumbling through it and not doing well. Teen doesn't know and Agatha's correcting him and they realize that there's daggers hanging on the ceiling or swords hanging on the ceiling and they are falling when they do things wrong. And he pulls 7 of swords and he's basically just pulling these cards. I don't think they matter that much. They kind of do. he says deception and betrayal for Seven of Swords, but it's reversed. So it means the opposite. So he thinks she's being truthful.
Mm-hmm.
And she takes over, and her plan is just let's go as fast as possible to try to get the right cards in the right slot.
Yeah.
Or we run out of swords. And it's like, that's kind of a terrible idea, but like also if you have no other option, that's like your only option.
Yeah. They've also dodged a sword already. So if you're thinking like you can just dodge it, then I guess it's a great plan.
And until the ceiling starts closing in on them.
For sure.
And this is another thing that this episode did, and I think had it not done it well, it would have been just like a jumbled mess. Their transitions are so good.
The transitions are very good. I do want to talk a little bit before, so they go in, and I think the establishing of this room is where I realized how hard this episode was going to hit.
Yeah.
And then I realized at the end of the episode how much harder it actually hit.
What do you mean?
So immediately, just like the cinematography of this episode stood out to me a lot. And it's a lot of like pan movements happening, which to me is signifying like realization. Like they do this a lot where somebody's like in front of the camera and like it's Lilia, and then they pan past the person and she's realized something or she's learned something.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like, that was throughout everything. And it's supposed to be like, it's this mix of realizing something / things aren't as they seem. And what really, this scene hit me for that when they panned up to the sword ceiling.
Okay.
Right. So even like the camera movements throughout the episode are revealing things and connecting things like Lilia's visions.
And mirroring how the actors or the characters felt.
Yes.
Right. Like with their realization of looking up, the camera, we are also a character in the world.
Exactly.
Looking up and seeing the daggers. Like it's making the story, it's telling the story without words. It's very smart. The cinematography is telling the story.
The other thing I liked about it was the pan up to the ceiling happened after the hourglass flipped, which I thought was like a cool like mimic thing. But looking at the episode, the hourglass time ending and then time restarting.
Right.
I'm shaking right now.
It's
like
so
the theme is
clear.
In your face. It's so brilliant.
Well, because every other time it's been like a clock or something. And hourglass obviously makes sense and fits with this whole like enchanted fairy tale type castle, right? Which, well, hold on, let me finish this thought. So, but it also is like a better symbol of time than just like a clock. Right, exactly.
It's so deliberate and so small.
And even if you're looking at this idea of the set design with like all of the circles, the ceiling itself is a circle, right? And it has this like winding circle, and like the table itself is a circle, just because it's basically the whole point is that time is not a straight line, right? Things are not linear for us. And so like even using the shapes to tell the story is so cool. I wonder if they were envisioning the Wicked Witch of the West like castle also to pull like references from that. Do you see what I'm saying?
But
that's kind of what it looked like to me.
I wasn't expecting this episode to be bad by any means, but after seeing those two thought out things back to back, I thought like, oh shit, this is going to be a good episode. And I was not disappointed.
It starts the episode. It's called Death's Hand in Mine, and it like opens with Lilia. Alice has already died, and I was like, the whole episode, I was like, please.
That was the other sort of expecting thing that I remember. Like starting with Lilia, I was like, oh, Lilia's probably going to die this episode.
I was like, please don't let her die. The whole episode, I was like, I don't want her to die. But obviously, for the story to like the theme to be told and like hit home, she had to. Oh god! And it was like such a good choice. But I was like, please don't die the whole time. So then Teen says, I wish Lilia was here, which
I also, sorry to interrupt you. I'm really sorry. This is the last thing I have for this. They never said this out loud. The swords and stuff always reset when they said the word time. And I think that was on purpose.
Oh, what do you mean?
Every time like the characters, they would say a sentence and the sentence would have the word time in it. That's when the room would reset. Like the ceiling didn't start coming down until somebody said time the first time. And then Lilia says time at something and then it resets and all the swords are back up there.
Whoa.
So I don't know. And there is one time Lilia says time like at the very end and it doesn't like reset. But that's something I noted. The other two times they said the word time.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So he says, I wish Lilia was here. And we transition to Jen and Lilia underground. And this is really cool. Lilia doesn't really remember what's going on right now. And all we know is that like they're looking for shelving, and Jen is kind of catching her up, which we find out later. It's just all the information Lilia had already told her. And like Teen is the son of the Scarlet Witch, kicked them off the road. Her memory's just out of it. And you're not really understanding why her memory isn't working, because she's not either. Because in her timeline of events, she doesn't understand fully what's happening to her yet. And like neither do we.
But so, you are aware of like, this is who Lily is. Like she's always spacing out. So the character struggle is very clear, which I think is very well done.
I think so too. And I feel like they gave Jen's character a lot of comedy this episode, which was really fun. Like she said, we had a heart-to-heart conversation 5 minutes ago. And then Lilia says something that like upsets Jen. She's like, 5 minutes ago, Lilia would never say that. Yeah,
it's really good. The actress is really funny too.
Yeah.
I really like the yellow in the stone of the walls, like the yellow brick road. I feel like
even the leaves leading up to the castle were yellow this time. Yeah, it's really cool. It keeps changing colors throughout the episodes, which is fun. And this is where we like really jump into things, because she says, you said this might happen, but you're being extra wispy or kooky. And then she's like transported. And basically I wrote it that like her memories are folding, right? Like
that was the other big, like you think you know what's up, and then you realize her visions are nested on top of each other. Right. And that really fucked me up.
Because you think you're like, okay, so I caught that card that she called and what it means. I got that. And it's like, yeah, we did. But also it's even fucking cooler than that. It's 10,000 times cooler than that.
Absolutely.
And her like having these visions, and we're like, okay, that's where that vision is. I called that. I realized that what that is. And it's like, no, you only knew half of it. Right. Like it was so cool, because to be able to have all of these things almost already realized and still have us being like surprised is crazy.
Yeah. Well, just seeing how perfectly the puzzle fits together. You know, I brought up Christopher Nolan at the beginning, because like Memento is the same idea. It's like a story told backwards, or like Inception is like nesting dreams on top of each other.
I finished this episode and I was like, because I've never seen Inception. And I was like, is this why people like Inception? Because people talk about it all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's on that level. Like it's so complicated, but then when it's spelled out, you're like, oh my God, how does everything make sense?
It's crazy.
And there's a character arc.
Right.
And I'm crying.
Right. So yeah, her memories start like folding on top of each other, and they start just basically going all the way back to when she was a kid. And
this also fucked me up. I keep forgetting they're all like 400 years old.
Well, this was just really cool.
Yeah.
To have her be going back to like her first lesson.
Yeah. I feel like that weirdly elevated it in a way too. Like,
oh, it's so
this made it feel like a film to me. Right. You know?
Well, it definitely did, because we saw the vision of her in episode 3 with the poison and like what that meant. And they did a really cool thing, because when we first see her like teacher, right? It's just her, that woman's just her teacher, right?
It might be a family member, but it was like a member of her coven.
Yeah, exactly. And the way they show it, the way the cinematography is the exact same from the vision before. And obviously like everything else, but the framing is one for one. What she's wearing is the same, just like different colors. And like before, we saw a skull over her, which is like the looming of death over her, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it just immediately told me like, okay, this character is who she saw in her vision without saying any words.
Yeah.
Genius. So she's having a lesson, and she then kind of like realizes what's happening, and she kind of she realizes like this is her first lesson on tea leaves, and that she says like she's always been bad at that, and she says this is fiction. You're telling yourself that. That's what you tell yourself.
I thought that was really cool.
I thought that was really good.
I feel like the whole time I was like, is Lilia the strongest witch that's ever existed? Just because the idea of this being able to jump around in time is so cool. Like this is not the B plot anywhere else, you know?
Right.
Like this isn't even the main thing going on in this series. And it is so well thought out and so cool and honestly like kind of scary. Like I was thinking through this episode, I was like, this is probably the scariest episode so far. And not like keep you up at night kind of scary, but just like how big it is.
Right.
Like this is something so much bigger than what we've been dealing with, which is just really cool.
It is really cool. And every time we go to this teacher character, she like imparts wisdom on Lilia, and
she's adorable. She has this cute little accent.
I know.
It looks like a Game of Thrones scene where they're in High Garden. Yeah. It looks gorgeous.
She gets transported back to sort of the present, like whatever area it is, and she's not confused anymore. She kind of realizes like what's happening, and she tells Jen that like, you look at me and you just see a doddering old broad, and Jen says, "What should I see?" "No, really, tell me. You said you had gaps, but tell me." And this is kind of where we catch up as an audience member and realize like what it is. And I'm just going to like explain what she explains. And she says, "The flow of time is an illusion. Most people don't realize that. When I was a child, I experienced time out of sequence, and now I am again." And so it's like, okay, that's really cool, right? So we're experiencing.
And she says it almost like nonchalantly.
Like factually, you know? Yes.
She's like, "Listen, Jen, time isn't real."
And I think that's part of what made the episode so exciting. Not obviously because we are jumping in and out of time and we're piecing together a puzzle with the character, but it's also because every single scene, you know that you're on borrowed time. Yeah. Right? You know that in this scene, it's going to end at any second and we're going to be transported somewhere different in this timeline.
Pick up the pieces.
And we need to know everything we can from this moment. And one, that's Patti LuPone's unbelievable acting, right?
Absolutely.
And it's also just the stakes have been raised. Like we understand as an audience member how important it is that we get this done now. And so you are on the edge of your seat as well, even though there's not a ton of imminent danger for these characters.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's the other thing, like writing the summary after that, like not even a lot really happens in this episode, which is, again, just very cool that they can focus in on these ideas and these concepts and flesh them out to such a level that this is the most interested I've been. And 80% of it is them walking in a tunnel.
Right.
You know?
Lilia says the reason why these gaps are coming back, why she's experiencing this out of sequence events is because she's near the end. And Jen is like all excited and she's like, "Oh, because we're near the end of the road, you're going to get your powers back." And I'm kind of like, I don't think that's what it is. And she says, "I don't know if I want this." And so then they get transported to the trial because, and this is like another cool transition, Agatha like pushes Lilia, and so we end up with like Agatha on top of Lilia, and she shoves Agatha away. She saved her from a dagger, and then we get this cool interaction between Teen and Lilia. And what's I think cool about this story or this episode is, yes, it's like super out of order, and like chronologically it isn't, or it is completely out of order, but for Lilia it's not.
Yeah.
So like it's grounded still. And so there's still a through line and a plot to follow, because for Lilia right now, she has not had any sort of heart to heart with Teen. She's not had any like forgiveness or reconciliation with Teen. And so she's mad at him here. See what I'm saying? And so the first instance we see them together. Do you see what I mean? Because she's like, even Jen is like, you're not mad at her anymore.
Yeah.
But it's just cool because it's grounded in, this is Lilia's sequence of events.
And it's cool because the previous episode, we had their actual first interaction. And this episode is like the coming to terms of that interaction, which again is just really cool. And it's playing with like perception, because like they haven't had a heart to heart, but they did, but now they're remembering it differently and they're different people. And it's just everything about this is so thought through. I wrote down, I don't normally think this about anybody, but I need a spin-off series about Lilia.
Yeah, really.
A spin-off within the spin-off, because I'm just so interested in how this system works, and Lilia specifically. I'm like, they really did it with this one.
Yeah, they really,
like I wrote down right after that, I wrote down, this is next level writing.
It is. It's really good. And basically, Teen's like reading her mind. And he apologizes and he says if he would have known who he was and what he did, he would have used his power to save Alice. And she remembers, and I think this is where he asks, like, if you put the sigil on me. Yeah. He realizes she says that she did. And she says it's because she felt like he needed more time. Mm-hmm. That's really good.
Yeah.
Like this idea that what time for her means, and she specifically gave him more time.
Yeah. I think that's another time the room reset. Is when she said that.
And so Jen says, basically, you're not mad at him anymore. Like, the flow of time is an illusion. I can tell you this, you're not mad.
Yeah. And she did another opportunity for like a joke. Like, she was like, you just said time is a construct. You're not mad anymore.
This is also where Lilia goes, you teenager. And Jen goes, ooh, the full name. That was so funny. That was really funny. But then after she says she felt like he needed more time, she gets in her time loop again.
Yeah.
And she's screaming from the first trial, which was her screaming the first time she met Agatha. And then she goes back to her teacher, and we just keep going in things like this. She goes back to her teacher, then she goes back to Jen in the tunnels, and she says, like, this happened a lot when I was younger, but she put it away. She put it away, quote, she ignored it because all I saw was death, is what she says, which is like really sad also. Cause like, yeah, I guess that's true. If that is something that's like, when you see the future, like that's so sad to think about.
Well, it's that, and it's the double entendre, because at the end it's death.
Right.
Like, it's so good.
And so then they find the shelving that they've been looking for, and they end the trial. They enter the trial, and she says, relax, baby, we're cool. And so, and it's like, see, so for us, it's the right order of events, because they are cool, because they figured it out the last time those two characters saw each other for us. And she's like, okay, I'm going to read you, Teen, this time. I'm going to do a reading for you.
Oh, they also ran into the Salem 7 at some point, right?
I don't know if that's yet, because I think I wrote it down. Oh, so it's not yet.
That's
I know
crazy.
It's crazy because it's like, also these scenes are pretty short.
Yeah.
They'll be some are a little bit longer, but like some are pretty short. And so it's like everything's going so fast. You're getting so much information so fast. And so she starts, she like basically really starts like doing the trial. And she tells him to think of a question. And Jen and Agatha just keep yelling. And she says it has to be vital to his journey on Earth. And he says, am I William or am I Billy? And the ceiling stops, and it's a good question. And so she kind of explains what this table is and what the spread is. And she's explaining it for them, and like we understand it as an audience member. And so she starts picking cards, and she says he's the magician, and that's enormous potential. And what's missing is the sun, which is a good fortune and reunion. And the music, I hadn't noticed it until this point in the episode, how good the music was, because it starts like picking up, because we're about to like, the loop's about to start again. And you're like, oh, no, like it's coming again. And so then she goes on this loop again. And because she says, why are you on this journey to get my power back? Oh, sorry. She says, her teacher says, why are you on this journey? Which is cool, because that would have been like, I think the next thing that she would have talked to Teen about with her cards.
Yeah.
And so we transition, and she says to get my power back. And the teacher's like, is it gone? Right? And it's like, and then we really get like the information that we've been missing, which she says her entire coven was wiped out. She saw it, and she told them, and nothing changed. And then the teacher says, death comes for us all, which is crazy, because that's what Lilia said to Teen when Alice died. And she says, you say it like it's a comfort. It is what we have in common, all of us. And she says, when will it come for me? And I'm like, no, please. I know we're foreshadowing the end, but I don't want this character to die. And then she says, I was falling. I will fall. And it's like, oh my gosh, like it's such amazing writing.
That was the one that I wrote down. So it's pan to one side, I'm falling, pan over, I will fall. And that to me gave me shivers down my body.
So crazy.
Because that's the turning point. Then the scenes get quicker, the music gets louder, she's piecing together everything. Right. And you're just like holding on as tight as you can.
Because then also every single trial has been about overcoming this trauma that you have. Yeah. And for her, we've now realized that her trauma is that she felt like she could have kept her coven from dying and saved her coven, and she didn't. She couldn't. Nothing changed. And when time is fully relative and there is no order of events, and just this idea that time and death go hand in hand, and that she doesn't see this as a negative anymore, it's so good. It's so good.
She's like believing the words.
Right. She's believing that like she can do it and that she isn't this forgotten woman, like she said. So she wakes up back up. And this was like sort of early on in the tunnels is where we transport to. They're walking in the tunnels, and she says the gaps are filling in. And which is like also another indicator like that she's going to die, because you don't resolve you don't fully resolve this.
Not on the road.
Right. And then like nothing happens. So this is when the Salem Seven enter.
Okay.
And so they hide. And this also got really emotional because they are not only saying all this like beautiful dialogue about time and death and all these crazy things that are like almost difficult to comprehend, but they're also bringing them together as a coven, because this is where Lilia says, oh, like, so this is so good. Like good art is like what makes me cry. And this is like so good. So basically they have two paths, which is so funny because it's like, she could have chosen either one, right? Like this idea of like two paths and what's your path going to be is like so literal. Now we're taking it and we're making it literal, and it feels like almost cheesy, but it's done so well that it's not even a little bit cheesy. So she says they see one of the paths and it's like towards the trial, and the other path is, Jen says it looks like it's the way out of the road, to the end of the road. And Lilia says like, I'm going to take this path to my trial and I hope you join me. And Jen's kind of like, basically like, why? And because Jen's trials happen, like it's all, Jen could go. And she says, because you are my sister in the craft. It's crazy. And so Jen goes with her. She goes with Lilia. It's so good. She says, I know what she did wrong. And then this is where we get back into the trial.
Yeah.
And she says, my path winds out of time. And she does a reading for herself. And so this is where she starts. This is where it gets like insane. This is where it goes like
high state, the ceiling's coming down, the camera's spinning in circles.
Right. It's like
everybody's yelling at each other.
Absolutely crazy. And so she starts pulling her cards for herself. She says, and it's basically like this whole, she's sort of like fully realized at this point.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, in my mind, she's now like, she's controlling the gaps. Like she's going back to those moments to pick the cards out.
Right.
Which is so badass.
Instead of, because you said this, that it felt like, it feels almost like we're a passenger to time. That like time is controlling the narrative. And then this is where it flips. And Lilia begins controlling the narrative and in turn controlling time. Yeah. So then she pulls she says, I'm the traveler. So she pulls the Queen of Cups. And what she's missing is the Three of Pentacles, which it means that she needed her coven and a community. And we go back to when she said the Three of Pentacles, which I don't remember when that was.
Me neither.
Oh, dang it. I should have written it down, but it's going so fast.
But this does now start like a secondary thing. So she's laying down the cards, and she lays down hers and what she wants. And then every other card is tied to another person in the group, in this coven, which is just such a genius way, while losing no momentum at all, while still being fully encapsulated in the story. I know exactly where everybody stands for the finale. Right. These two episodes. Like that was such a gorgeous in-universe way to sort of reset. Not reset, but like the audience is fully aware of what is happening right now. Everybody knows where everybody's at. Right. She literally like as clear as day spells out their flaws, what they need, how they fix it. Which I just thought was masterfully done. It is. And it's really cool because she's not going chronologically in time with these cards because they aren't chronological. Yeah. Right. And I just think that's like a tiny thing, but it's really smart because you could have been tempted to go completely in order. Yeah. And that's not what they did because they made a much better choice, right? To like fit with the theme. And it's small, but it shows us like how much they fully understand the concept they've created. Yeah. Really good. I want to pull up
what it was. I think I want to pull up what she was pulling.
Okay.
Yeah, so she calls herself, so she pulls the card for herself, which is the Queen of Cups. And it's really cool because she says that her inner voice is to be trusted. And that's like the whole entire point of this character is that she's realizing that she needs to trust her inner voice. It's so good. Every tiny detail is good with this show. And the Three of Pentacles is when she first meets Agatha and Teen. That's really cute. Good. When she first meets
new coven.
Yes, when her new coven has come into her life of what's missing, she pulls the Three of Pentacles, and that's what she needed. And so then she says,
and they show those scenes as she's like picking the card. Like we go back to those scenes, which is really cute.
It is really cute. So then she pulls the path behind her. The card is the Knight of Wands. So it's like fire and bravery is what she says. And that's when Alice was saving Agatha, which is really cool. And something else is even while she's doing the right thing, the cards or the swords keep falling, right? At this moment, which is just like growing tension and the ceiling keeps coming down.
Yeah. Do the swords keep falling? I thought they just kept lowering.
You're right. They don't fall, but they do keep coming down.
Cool. And that's just because they're like out of time.
Right. Exactly.
Out of time.
So the next one, which is the path ahead, which is when she pulls the High Priestess, and it's immense spiritual power, unable or unwilling to use it. And that's when she meets Jen, is the High Priestess. And that really makes me think Jen is going to die in the next episode.
Yes.
Like, I really think she is.
Especially after getting all these comedic lines this episode.
Right. Especially because it's just like if Jen is the path ahead and what Jen is going to have to sacrifice in the end, right? Like if Alice and Lilia have both sacrificed things for the coven, I think Jen is also. And her being the path ahead, like I can imagine next episode's going to be just as like impactful as this one.
Well, because there's just still so many questions about her backstory, like who the doctor was and things like that. Like we know a little bit, but not nearly enough.
Right. So then the next one she pulls is the, which is her obstacle, which is Three of Swords. And this is heartbreak, sorrow, and grief. And this is when Teen was injured and Agatha was watching over Teen. Yeah, it's crazy. And then Windfall, she pulls the Tower Reversed, which is like disaster, destruction. But when it's reversed, it means a miraculous transformation. She pulled this when she first met Teen. So it's really cool because a lot of these are when she first meets these people. Yeah. And
just like, again, cementing that idea, like they were fated to be together.
Right, exactly.
On the prophecy of the road.
and then she says destination. And they fall back down in the tunnels. And this is where we see Rio for the first time. And Lilia puts together basically like kind of her last piece of the puzzle, which is that Rio is death. Yeah. And this is another really cool transition because they've done this before and they're doing it again. It's like she pulls the card destination and we transport to when she sees Rio, which is her destination, which is death. Which again,
we see her on the ground, which means she just fell from the top, which this whole episode, you're thinking of her falling.
Right.
At some
That's
point.
The whole thing.
So even this, we're going back to the beginning.
Right.
And who is there? Death.
Exactly.
Always, constantly.
Right. It's so good. And this, the falling motif is so genius in this episode, like falling through time, like sands through an hourglass.
Oh, yeah.
Right. It's just this sort of like you can't control.
It's such a strong visual too. Like
right.
I'm going to cry.
Like to start with her falling.
Yeah.
And it being this metaphor, it's basically a metaphor of death, right? Don't you agree? It's like what the falling is. And
I don't know. I have more to say about it, but I want to wait till we get there.
Yeah. Okay. So Lilia at this point recognizes that Rio is death, and she places the card down, and then the daggers stop, and the door opens. And Lilia like breaks it to them all who Rio is and that she's the original Green Witch. And this is when the Salem Seven start to show up. And she says, basically, everybody out, let's go. We need to leave. And she tells Teen to go. She tells Agatha, this is important. When she calls you a coward, hit the deck.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, so we're going to have like a Salem 7 fight right now. And that's what this is about. No, it's not at all. And I was like, because I really didn't want her to die. And I was like, no, that's not what's going to happen. Please don't let that happen.
Yeah.
And so then Agatha goes, and then she tells Jen to go, but Jen says, I'm not letting you go. And then she says, I loved being a witch. It's so good.
It's so good.
It's
and even
really
that, because
good.
like every episode she's talking about how her culture is being destroyed and this and that, and it's just really good.
Well, she's like shunned her coven.
Yeah.
This is so stupid that I'm like crying so much. But I was like sobbing earlier, so this is far from like how things were going earlier. But she's like shunned her coven, and I think it's so genius that this episode, she at one point realizes that who everyone's dressed as, and Jen goes, we'll worry about this later, right? You can be mad about it later, which one, that never happens. But two, that was it. Because it didn't fucking matter, right? Like, she was so, like, realized in herself who she was that it, like, didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
That this idea of, like, who witches have been to her is secondary when it's always taken precedent, like, when it's always been in the forefront for her. It's so cool that something so... She basically sees how trivial it is now, I would say. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
So then... I have to wipe my tear. So then she says... basically the Salem Seven are like trickling into the trial in their animal forms. And she says, you may not know this about the road, but when you successfully complete a trial, it's not a good idea to overstay your welcome. And she's kind of like and she's like, she's
a bad bitch right now.
Right. It's so good. She's like, usually something terrible happens. And she goes like the tower upright. And she turns the card.
She starts reading the description of the card out loud.
Yeah. She says, which means like destruction, right? Gravity like reverses.
Yeah. This shit blew my fucking mind.
It's so good. Because on so many levels, this is so good. One, she's like completely in control. And to like take the card and turn it upside down and to like choose this path of destruction, right? To choose this. Two, the timer turns upside down.
Mm-hmm.
In the whole thing about how time being relative and an illusion and like time resets.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Time resetting as basically the world resets that they're in. And just like one by one, the Salem Seven are like drawn up to the ceiling with the daggers and are impaled. Mm-hmm. And she's like holding on to the table.
Yeah. It's so good. So even from the card itself, she lists what the card means, but we know that reversed is miraculous transformation, right?
Right.
So when she physically reverses the card, that's when the gravity shifts.
Yeah.
Which is fucking genius.
It is
We realize the falling from the beginning is her falling upwards.
Right.
Again, like completely switching everything on its head, which is what all the cinematography and all the visuals have been talking about this entire time.
Of like, exactly, yes.
They all die. And she lets go and embraces the end.
Yeah.
Or so we think. And that's why, to me, the falling at the beginning doesn't symbolize death. I don't think so. Because at this point, she has no reason to be scared of death.
Right.
Death has overcome, like, it is fine. It is just a part of this forever cycle that happens, right? So to me, her falling at the beginning is like the fear of unknowing, the despair she feels, her guilt, everything about it. Because at the beginning, she's also falling in a dark abyss. We don't see anything around her. And at the end, everything around her is clear. She sees it. She sees where she is, and she's choosing to do it.
And like, that goes back to the gaps being filled in.
Exactly. For her. And you realize, like, you're thinking down this whole time. She's been lifted up. Like,
it's so thought through.
Shit.
It's so good. I'm not ready to talk about the next part because it's like, where is her crying a lot in the episode? Yeah. I'm trying so hard not to cry on this freaking podcast right now. So
very tastefully, she closes her eyes. The camera cuts out. There's no grotesque sound effect. Everybody knows what happened.
Right.
It's done beautifully.
And like she chose to let go.
And
she's like so smart. She chose to like embrace death and let go. And it cuts to the final scene of the episode, which is back to her as a little kid. And her teacher says, let's begin.
Well, because I wrote this down when she was falling up. I was like, ending the episode where it started was fucking genius. And then they play that. And I was like, they really ended where it started.
Because like time being an illusion, time being flipped on its head. And like this idea of death and time not being a negative and instead being interwoven together. And her sitting down as a little kid at the start of her story.
Yeah.
And we say, let's begin as we end the episode. Like, that is genius.
Absolutely genius.
And the thing is it didn't come out of nowhere. Like, it was so... The reason why it was so good is not only because we're ending where the story really begins for her. It's because this idea is the teacher continues to like give her wisdom of who she is, right? And tries so hard to help her understand her calling in life and what she is.
Well, to me,
no. I'm going on a point.
Okay.
And she says, for her to the story to end when she has fully realized this, fully embraced death, fully gotten over the trauma of what's happened to her, and now we're ready to quote start her story. And the teacher's ready to actually begin teaching her because she's learned, right? She's learned where she is.
Yeah.
That's genius.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Good.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
because in my
so
mind,
good.
If not the whole coven, at least the teacher as well deals with the same power in some way, right?
I don't think it's the whole... I think she's special.
Okay.
100%.
But I do feel like the teacher, maybe not as clearly as Lilia, but like she's seen what is to happen. Right. And she can, and that's part of it. She can't do it. She needs to guide because that is how it needs to happen because the whole thing. And it's so beautiful.
It is so
And then
good.
they played fucking Time in a Bottle for the credits.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me?
That was a low blow to end this episode.
Like, kick us while we're down.
Holy shit.
This is so embarrassing to be crying this much, except it isn't because I cry all the time.
It's great. I mean, this episode was absolutely phenomenal.
I feel like it's one of the top episodes in general. Like I would put this in like top 10 episodes of TV, you know? Like this episode specifically. And then for it to not only be like such a good episode, like I would equate this to like the Breaking Bad episode where he like tricks Jesse and we find out like spoilers for Breaking Bad and he like poisons the little kid himself. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And like it ends with him like looking at the plant, which was like where the story started. Do you see what I'm saying? Like I would put this on that level.
Yeah.
Like
it's so good.
And I feel like that's what drives me so crazy when people don't like it is because when you say something isn't written well, you can't just say it's bad writing and then be like, okay, I'm done. Like you got to give me a reason. And the thing is, you can't give me a reason why this is bad. This is 10 out of 10, a perfect episode.
It's great. And I mean, the series as a whole has done such a good job. You can feel comfortable, but you can never fully predict what's happening. You can never guess every spot that's going to be made. It's such an evolving show, but it has such a clear through line the entire time. And this episode was absolutely no exception. The only difference is that on its own, this episode should win an Oscar, probably.
It's amazing.
I figured once we got to like the home stretch, right? Once we figured out who Teen really was, these episodes are going to get pretty like intense, but I didn't realize episode 7 was going to hit this hard.
Right.
And I guess that makes sense because they're releasing the 2 back to back.
Yeah. The only thing I didn't like about this episode is I can't technically call it the penultimate episode.
That is true.
That was the only thing I was like upset about.
I have one tiny critique, and this does not make the episode less perfect in any way. I probably would have done this earlier on in the series. I wish we could have had a scene where we see the power of the Salem Seven.
To know how impactful it is that they're...
Because all we've seen them do is, and I get that they're scary because we're always running from them, but we've never really interacted. And to see like why they're such a threat, and then to have Lilia absolutely ice them all right there would have been like a final like, damn, she was strong, you know?
Especially because her choice saves them. If we would have known 100% that their choice saved them, which we do know that, but like I see what you're saying.
So that's my only critique. And again, not with this episode, just like I think overall I would have liked to know a little bit more about them. You know, and maybe they're like eternal. Maybe they come back the next episode and it's all wordless.
No, I don't think it. I think because I think the next like villain is Rio.
Yeah.
Which I wanted to talk about Rio's character.
Okay.
One, I know like everyone pretty much knew she was death. I kind of think people would have been, even without like the Funko Pop spoilers, I really think people would have
I think it's obvious.
Known that because they were.
Yeah. And I think that's another good example of this episode doing like a false reveal. Like you reveal that Rio's death and everyone already knows. But the real reveal is that Lilia has been running from death her entire life. And it's this whole other thing that you had no idea that was going on.
Because when Rio sees her, she says, recognize me, Lilia.
Yeah, which was another cool thing. Because Lilia's in this weird time loop, but Rio knows exactly where she is.
Right.
Which again, like death and time, like you said, are hand in hand.
Yes.
Which I thought was really neat.
In the episode's literally called I Hold Death's Hand in Mine.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
so, and it's the way that like Rio's been acting the whole time like she's crazy, and I'm like the only person who could understand what Lilia is going through is somebody who's like a little fucking crazy,
right?
You know, so I just thought that was really cool. And they didn't really say anything, but it was scary to me. That was another like kind of scary moment, like Lilia is going through this crazy time jumping adventure, and Rio's just like, there you are, and I'm like, oh my god,
at a specific moment, it's really cool. Oh, I was going to say something. Yeah, I think it's cool, this idea that time and death go hand in hand, especially because the teacher saying, like, death is what basically, like, unites us all. It's the one thing everybody has in common. Because I would also say, like, time is the one thing everyone has in common, right? Yeah. Like, because death and time, the end of your time is death. Except it's not, and that's what Lilia realizes. Yeah. It's just so genius, and to have an actual character be death in the episode, and she's been missing for like 2 episodes, right? And for her to come back in this episode is really cool.
It's really good.
It's very cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say about Rio.
They skimped us on the reveal, just like they did with Wiccan the first time. We saw her costume like in darkness, which is like, what a tease.
I know. So I'm guessing what's going to happen after this is like Rio, probably what it is Jen's going to die in the trial, right? I'm pretty sure they go to a morgue. It looks like to me in like the trial or the videos that I've seen or pictures that I've seen, or even and Jen's character poster that like Disney itself released, like Marvel released, is her at the morgue. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure Jen's gonna like sacrifice herself in the trial, but not after. I think it's one of 2 things. Because maybe Rio is like the big bad kind of, and Jen sacrifices herself for Agatha and Teen kind of thing, and that's why she is, quote, the path ahead. Yeah. But I could also see her sacrificing herself in the trial, and all of this was for Rio wants Billy because Billy cheated death. That's like the whole thing is what Rio wants.
That makes sense.
And then Agatha basically is like, you can't have him. Right. And then that's the real thing we overcome at the end.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or at least a part of it. You know, so next week's episode 8 is probably gonna be the trial. I have no freaking clue what 9 is. I have no clue what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious if they're gonna end this idea or if it's gonna clearly set up a second season.
I think they said, I'm pretty sure the creator said it's just the 1 season.
Okay. Then I think it'll, coming to fruition, whatever happens will happen.
One more thing I want to say is Lilia, when they're in the tunnels underground, she finds a book, which I think is Teen's spell book.
Yeah, she gave it back to him at the end.
She did? Oh, okay, I missed it. Because he says, where is my spell book? In the episode where they're in the 1980s horror film, Agatha's episode. And so I guess he just left it. He lost it and it ended up like underground. Yeah. Okay. And so she gives it back to him. So, I mean, that's going to come back into play.
Do you have a quote for this episode?
Yeah, I do. There were so many good quotes.
Oh, yeah.
So many good ones. But I went with this one. She says, this was the teacher to Lilia. She tells her, your task is not to control, but to see. And I feel like that's really cool because that's like the point. And I don't know. There were so many good quotes. And I already said some of them, but I felt like that was like when Lilia started putting these together.
I want to watch the episode right now again.
I know, me too.
I typed all caps. She's falling up. Holy shit, the show is so good.
It is really good. It's really good. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to say? I feel like there's so much to say about the episode. I want to make sure like I didn't miss anything.
You should just watch the episode. You should just watch Agatha All Along.
It's really good.
I can't believe how much fun I've been having. And I can't believe how much I cried today in the last 2 hours.
Just how unbelievably thought out this script is. And how amazingly talented Patti LuPone is. Like, this was insane.
This is, I mean, again, coming into this as a Marvel property, I don't even know if I was expecting to like it, you know?
Yeah.
Let alone it become one of my all-time favorite shows because of how creative and special and different it is and how many risks they are taking and how smart every aspect of the production is. I feel like I say it every single episode, but every person working on the show knows how to do their thing. And it's inspiring. Thank you so much for listening. You've heard our opinions. We would love to hear yours. We love reading all your comments over all of our different social media platforms. The conversations after the episodes are what we really look forward to each week. The best way to support the show is to share this. Word of mouth is still the best way. Convince your friends to listen to us, especially if you've got people who love or hate Agatha All Along. If you do have friends who hate Agatha All Along, I would get some new friends, though. That's it for this episode. Until next time, I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this has been
Welcome to the Writer's Room.
Good night.